as we wrap up our news review this morning, of course, Bwana Silvana Sosoro, you had mentioned by deed of sending your condolences to the family of the late Winnie Mandela, because it is a big story and it features on the front pages of the Daily Nation. So I'd like to give the entire panel an opportunity to say something about Winnie Mandela and her contribution, not just to progress in Africa, but to the politics of Africa as well, anti-apartheid politics. She's been seen as a heroine, but also as a very controversial figure in her country. She died yesterday at the age of 81, and the world continues to mourn her. She's been given quite some coverage on the dailies this morning. On the front page of the Standard, almost half of the page, on the front page, almost half of it with a very colorful photo. Winnie Mandela, mother of New South Africa, dies. And page 2 and 3 of the Standard have been reserved for stories to do with her death, including her illness. Winnie spent 10 days in hospital with infection on the bottom of page 3. Yes, it's also on the top strip of the Daily Nation. Winnie Mandela, South Africa's flawed heroine. The story continues on page 8. Winnie Mandela, South Africa's flawed heroine, anti-apartheid activist who died at 81, was seen as nation's mother, but also controversial. Yes, let's start with you, Senator.
First and foremost, I've always been fascinated by the black people's struggle in South Africa against apartheid rule. When I was a young boy, even now, I used to listen to a lot of music that was talking against apartheid. Songs like President Buddha is a mosquito. You recall President Buddha of South Africa, and several other songs, anti-apartheid music by various musicians.
Senator has other talents as well.
So the point is, I've always been fascinated by that history. And to that extent, I've always liked Winnie Mandela. She fought against the white domination. I've always been fascinated by people like Steve Biko, people like, of course, Mandela himself. And therefore, personally, and on behalf of those people who have always followed the politics of South Africa, we are quite disturbed and quite we are mourning that day. Be that as it may, I think she appeared to have her own major personal flaws. Surely like that incident where a certain young boy was killed and she was convicted of being a part of that plot that probably led to the death of that young boy. I think that really blots our legacy. We need to highlight that, because surely you don't participate in criminal activities, notwithstanding you being a strong fighter for democracy. Be that as it may, her strength is on the fact she's a woman, and she was quite courageous. I know in several societies, very few women, you will see them there in the forefront fighting against a major system. For her, she was quite strong. She stayed true to the fight, and she was able to probably shepherd that country into a good society. And therefore, there's a song that is called Winnie Mandela by Judy Mowatt. And I want to dedicate that song.
Will you sing that as well?
It is Winnie Mandela. I can't recall it, but she was a good lady.
I'm sure it sounds different if played on record. Peter Mathuki.
Indeed, Africa and the world is mourning, and at the same time also celebrating life of a great lady in the name of Winnie Mandela. Of course, recalling what her contribution during the revolution, during the apartheid in South Africa, and therefore, imagine a situation where, and most of the women will not do that, your husband is taken into detention because of political process, and you continue pushing that agenda until he's out of it and comes out. I think she's, we must appreciate, we must celebrate her life. She's actually an icon. She's set the best example for leadership in this continent going forward, and we really appreciate. We are proud of her as Africa. In fact, for some of us who have grown reading history and so forth, we learned a lot from her. And in fact, if Mandela and South Africa was not there as such, would not be understanding about the issues of revolution and the issues of but now, out of the struggle of South Africa, and we don't talk of South Africa largely in politics and the struggle, we are talking of Winnie Mandela, we are talking of Nelson Mandela. So she's a great lady. We appreciate, we celebrate. May her soul rest in peace. And we join South Africans and the entire continent in mourning and celebrating her life as well.
Okay. Well, now, Soro, do you have any songs about Winnie Mandela to sing for us?
Unfortunately, I don't. I'm not a very good singer like Mr. Irongo Kenyatta. But then, for me, this is the way to die. This is the way to live and die. I mean, that the whole world gets to know that you are alive at some point.
And you have died.
That is, and you've died. That is the way to live a complete life. And it's a clear, inspiration to us that she's lived her life to completion. One thing that she really fought for is when she actually stood firm for her late husband, or ex-husband, and stood firm against apartheid in South Africa. In as much as she had her faults that Senator said, for me, every person has got their down moments. Every person has done something very embarrassing, knowingly or unknowingly. And if you've actually not done it, then you're yet to do it. You haven't lived your life in completion. That should not be looked at as much, because she's really done a lot of things. And as a woman, every woman in this country should now look at, the woman who's relived her life completely should now start focusing on Winnie Mandela completely. Look at her life. Look at the way she believed, she fought for what she believed in. Don't sit down there and wait and keep whining of what this ought to have gone this way, things should work this way and stuff like that. You need to do something. Stand out and do something to celebrate her life. That she's a testimony that even women can do things that are memorable. Even women can actually do things that can be out there and people can admire all over. I think it's high time we celebrate her life. Although I tend to think that there is much that ought to have been done to save her life, but then it's unfortunate. It's God's timing.
Yes.
May her soul rest in peace.
Okay. The Standard on page 2 and 3 there, they've shared quite a number of photos. One of them of a very young Winnie Mandela clad in traditional dress as she attended her husband Nelson Mandela's trial in Pretoria, South Africa on October 22nd, 1962. Our president, I think, must have been very young at that time, Uhuru Kenyatta. Winnie Mandela raises a fist in black salute for announcing that massive pop concert. Photos there. How with Wilson Ndolo Aya, a former Kenyan MP. There, another one of the U.S. Senator Edward Kennedy. This is a woman who's been in public profile for quite a long while.